Wszystko zaczęło się od króla Jagiełły. Mała Łodzia stała się miastem, które w XIX wieku rozwijało się najszybciej na świecie. W ciągu zaledwie 60 lat od powstania pierwszej manufaktury powstaje przemysłowa, wielonarodowościowa metropolia. Jednak wiatry historii nie zawsze jej sprzyjały. To, co zniszczył los, odbudowują łodzianie. Nasza Łódź. Miasto wielkich szans. Od 600 lat w sercu Polski i Europy.
Jesteśmy Polakami. Jesteśmy niezwykłym społeczeństwem. Zawsze w obliczu wielkiego wyzwania potrafimy się mobilizować. Potrafimy stawić czoła wielkim wyzwaniom. Bo nie potrafimy stać obojętnie. Bo obchodzi nas bezpieczeństwo i przyszłość naszych dzieci. Bo wierzymy, że nadzieja zwycięża apatię, lęk i strach. Bo mimo wszelkich przeciwności nigdy się nie poddajemy. Potrafimy ciężko pracować, wspierać się i działać razem. Bo zależy nam na naszej ojczyźnie, naszym osiedlu, naszej ulicy. Bo chcemy naszych niezbywalnych praw i wolności. Bo nie oddamy naszych marzeń. Nadchodzi punkt zwrotny.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the next 3 days we will hear different definitions of the turning point. Every year the excellent, wonderful audience of the Freedom Games is joined by new participants. I would like to introduce the next speaker, a special person who is very important for Liberté, for Freedom Games and for Łódź. Leszek Jażdżewski, the Liberté editor-in-chief, the co-founder of the Freedom Games, Europe Future Fellow in Vienna, Policy Fellow in the European Policy Institute, a graduate of the Memorial Fund. He's one of the leaders selected by the Teraz Polska associations. Before he was in Oxford University. In a moment we will see him on our stage. Leszek Jażdżewski. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 10 years. It has flown. I recognize some faces. Throughout all these editions I have met with many of you. I remember a story when I was sitting on the 3rd of May in the first row next to Donald Tusk. And there was a moment when the rector of the university finished his speech, and the prime minister started looking around and said, "Where is Graś with my speech?" And I told him, "Prime Minister, I lost my rucksack in the last row, so my speech is somewhere there. So there is a problem." We decided, because if your speech is not here, nobody will take any notice. So this is when I thought, well, we will see. But there are situations when it's worth forgetting the speeches. Today I will make sure that this is exciting speech for you. From the hermitage of privacy, from the whirlpool of the work, we need to take away these people who are against the commonwealth, who appreciate more their independence, and they prefer to be subjectionate. So this is the beginning part of the dream about Poland, which opened the edition of Liberté in June 2008. Over 15 years ago. And you are sitting here in front of me. Hundreds of you will join the Freedom Games. Tens of thousands, and many of you, I know, have participated in numerous protests and manifestations. Many of you are involved in the monitoring of election. in Poland. I remember that when I was writing this 15 years ago and 10 years ago, when together with Błażej and our team, we were starting the Modest at the time, Freedom Games, I never thought that this civic commitment I was appealing for in this edition will gain such a spectacular dimension. None of us probably feels that we can triumph, because this commitment does not only result from the internal need. It's obvious that there must be an internal need to go out, to protest, to leave our comfort zone. I think that this commitment, which also brought you to the Freedom Games and to all these protests in the last 8 years, is due to the feeling that something very wrong happened to the rule of law, to democracy and our freedom. Thousands of texts and appeals would not give as much as the fact that the judgment of the Constitutional High Court was not published, and also if not the public reaction against the liquidation of the legal abortion in Poland. Still, the government who changed the democracy into propaganda, and still the government is the same, and they feel, the politicians, the governing party feels that they can do anything they like, that they govern our souls. So how come that the citizens who support the main country is not protesting, do not say stop, it's gone too far? Why our commitment, why our protests are so inefficient? How come, how is it possible that they can do it and nobody can do anything about this? So there's a chaos. Anarchy is loosed upon the world, the blood-dimmed tide is loosed and everywhere. The ceremony of innocence is drowned, the best lack all conviction, while the words are full of passionate intensity. William Butler Yeats, The Second Coming, translated by Antoni Libera. So very often these are the people who do not know much, feel that they are strong. But it's not the time, it's not the place to deal with the leaders. Very soon they will be checked by the voters. I didn't want to mention this, but I feel forced by the recent events. You know very well that Agnieszka Holland, who received the award in Venice, tomorrow she will visit the Freedom Games virtually. So she became the victim of persecution by the propagandists of the authorities. So the cannons they aimed at Agnieszka Holland and Donald Tusk would probably make the Jerzy Urban propaganda apparatus shy. So we've heard some mentions of the German occupation. This is what Minister Ziobro mentioned. So he compared Agnieszka Holland's film to the concentration camps, to Hitler propaganda. How come she's compared to the Hitler propaganda? You know that for more than 12 months there are the acts of dehumanization of refugees, of people who are in the eastern border of Poland. These are people who want to have a better life, who want to save their families, who do not want to be the victims of persecution. So the applications for asylum have been actually faked. So there is this famous procedure of relocation, which Poland decided to block, and to have the referendum, notorious referendum. The reason, maybe not the only reason, but probably the most important reason for which the current government still manages so many Polish polls, is the fact that some scripts based on the Polish community identity is based. So there is this comparison between ours and theirs, Poles, Catholics versus Jewish. So there is this fight for the national independence. So there is logical justification for these scripts in our latest history. Each of them was at certain stage necessary to maintain the national community. So it's very important for the history. So we're demanding that the Germans paid us reparations, and we try to falsify the facts which do not match the Polish ethos. Whether we want it or not, it's not the Wawel Castle or the Royal Castle that is the key monument in Poland. It's the concentration camp in Auschwitz. So probably our awareness is not sufficient when it comes to the scale of the strategy of our nations. We were unable to defend our Jewish neighbors. Polish people were divided by the Nuremberg criteria to those who will be murdered immediately in the ghettos and camps, and to those who will be semi-slaves.
I met some of these people in the Polish parliament who still nurture the criteria, who pick their nose saying, you know, Michnik or other people of Jewish origin should have different names. Holocaust left a gap in the history. The crime of anti-Semitism is still living in our Polish, German, Jewish city, where we still find David stars, to show that we don't like some football clubs and we should be really sensitive to it. I know that many of you may feel offended by me saying that when I hear the words about Polish concentration camps, I feel they are somehow Polish. I don't mean the perpetrators, but responsibility, and they should become Polish. They are a part of our national history. They are Polish concentration camps because they are on the Polish ground. We are responsible towards the world, whether we can face the tragedy and the cemetery where we live and where we step on. 81 years ago, in Łódź, Wielka Szpera ended. Even when we consider the volume of Hitler's crimes, it was an exceptional event. Mothers and ghetto authorities forced mothers to donate all the children under 10 to give them from the ghetto, and the same applied to people over 60. It means all people not able to work. The efforts of Mirek Kulisz from Angora and Marek Miller, a book was published called Wielka Szpera. You can buy it here. These are the records of conversations with those who managed to survive. Let me read a quotation from the book. Memories of Sarah Ziskind. Through the open gate, I saw 2 vehicles with children. I will never forget what I saw. Many children were wearing the best festive clothes. Girls were wearing colorful ribbons. Some could think they were going to attend an event. Despite the Germans' presence, the children were crying and calling their mothers. I remember a boy around 8 jumping off the vehicle and escaping. I saw a policeman fighting with a desperate woman who was trying to steal her child from the vehicle. I'm quoting these dramatic stories, and I spent so much time talking about it during the Freedom Games opening to make us aware of the scale of the challenge we are about to face. What does the turning point mean for Poland? This is the challenge which goes much beyond the next election. It is nearly heroic because it means establishing or re-establishing the community. When we turn back to history and we dive into nostalgia, there is a huge field of opportunities in between. Polish history is a horror which some try to turn into a Western. Polish patriotism requires contribution of blood. The renewal of community that I'm calling for requires asking a question about responsibilities towards our fatherland, or reversing the question, will you die for your fatherland? How to live with it or except for it. The renewal of the national community is renewing the bonds between those which create fashion, the elites, and the cosmopolitan groups for whom an address is a matter of choice, and those who are assigned to the land and identity, to those who will die where they were born, to those who do not change but are changed, who from the tram called modernization stopped at liberty. In the 19th century, the elites used nationalism to create nations, which at the beginning of 20th century exploded the empires. Nowadays, nationalism is used to discipline liberal elites. Nationalism deprived of the national element turns into xenophobia. A liberalism without the national element is deprived of political significance. The problem for us who call themselves liberals is that the individualism that we are so proud of or so concerned about is apolitical, against privacy, against family, mentioned at the top of values, combined with collective national mentality which forces unity. When we face national tragedies, it excludes building diversified community. Anti-political individualism says no to politics. Anti-pluralistic politics says no to individual diversity. And these extremes are those that the politicians try to use. They call for not paying taxes or for avoiding refugees. As long as Polish identity remains schizophrenic, we'll be doomed for such a gap. We need to remember the mundane disappointment. We won't make Danish people out of Poles. We cannot impose a new identity. Despite the fact that the manipulation tools are far more advanced than in the communism times, the authorities that try to promote the so-called patriotic values makes them seem ridiculous. It would be a mistake to treat tragedy as an altar where we store national monuments and memoirs. Such work does not bring spectacular results immediately. Dziady in the Słowackie theatre are exactly what I mean, working on the identity from inside, a challenge for Polish identity. The authorities' aggression is a testimony to the fact that we do not understand the mainstream Polish culture, or it is a testimony to something contrary, to deep understanding of political links. Combining individual rights and politics will mean losing their power. And that's the key to victory. Community means understanding cultural codes and reference system, accepting our responsibilities towards other members of society. Perhaps we should ask a question to ourselves. Each of us should ask a question. What do I come with? What can I offer for all of us? Do I improve or deteriorate the common goods? It's easy to ask such questions to others, but that's the only way to start from yourself and leave the logic of primitive egoism nurtured by our politicians on both sides of the political conflict, trying to satisfy their egoism, the egoism which asks, what will I get from it? The nation who thinks using these categories will always be doomed for secondary things. only accepting the fact that we'll get something from people whom we don't help, but from other people in different future, will we create society based on democracy and trust and a collective success. It's not possible without it. We feel anger against parties and people who are like parasites using or eating what we have built together. This is what happens when there is no ethics of responsibility towards community. Then we leave it to the most cruel individuals, professionals of exploiting the common good. It might be the anger that will become our passion, triggering our action. The passion mentioned in the book I quoted. The anger for hypocrisy and the hope will set our operating horizon. Can the identity of war and occupation be turned into the identity of peace? Can you turn dependence into independence, the fear of betray into political rationality, and the hostile nationalism into the comfort of being yourself? I don't know. But I do know that if we don't try, we'll never be the community of free people. Thank you.